What is up, everybody? It's the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jake Rowe with Dogs 24/7. With me, Kip Adams and Rusty Mansell. And we're live again, just like we were after the game the other night. I can't say we.
Don't say we. Don't say we.
Don't say it was really only Rusty for a while.
we Dogs 24/7 was live after the game. Rusty and Kip did the heavy lifting while I was doing the Zoom call and talking to the guys after the game. We're going to close the book on the Clemson game. We gave ourselves 48 hours to kind of get over it. Georgia gave their players 24. We talked to Kirby today. It was in person media availability where Kirby Smart kind of expressed some concerns over COVID and talked about injuries, talked about some other things. We're going to get to that. We're going to pose a few questions going forward based on what we saw Saturday night. There's a lot to talk about here.
Jake, let me interrupt you, Jake.
Go ahead, Rusty.
When's the last time y'all have done in-person interviews in Athens?
Prior to the 2020 Sugar Bowl. We've been in – heck, you know what, Rusty? I'm not even sure that we got anything then. Yeah. I don't think we did. Maybe it might – you know what? It might have been the early signing period, like the early signing day 2019.
December 2019?
Yeah.
How was the layout?
How back then?
Oh, my God, all of us. How was the layout? Did you guys do that in the –
Same old for Kirby, but for players, they backed us up about 10, 15 feet. And then kind of made that a little different. Talked to Latavius Brenny, Jake Camarda, and Warren Erickson, and that's kind of how that went. But other than masking up and kind of not being able to work in the media workroom, everything was pretty similar as far as Kirby went. And I don't know, man. I don't know which way I prefer it. After today, we'll see how they do it going forward. But to hear Kirby kind of say how concerned he was about COVID while we're actually meeting in person for the first time was actually kind of odd. And we're going to get all that. But let's close the book on Clemson real quick. And Rusty, I got a question for you. Mm-hmm. When you look at that game, what do you think is going to be more indicative? What element that I'm going to mention do you think is going to be more indicative, more consistent, more the common thread throughout Georgia's season, the way the defense played or the way the offense played?
Certainly, I think the defense. I think the defense is elite. We've talked about that. There's still many questions on offense. People break these things down and get into panic mode, and that's the reason why we all have jobs, because people care. That's something that we have to we kind of digest that as well and what's going on. But I know this: Georgia is elite on defense. They're deep. The back end of Georgia is where kind of the questions are. They played pretty damn good, in my opinion, the other night. But here's reality. That front seven is ridiculous. I mean, it is huge. They're fast. Those linebackers are able to just roam free. Those guys can run. If you do that, those guys can cover. And I've said that many times on the Junkyard that the secondary's best friend is going to be that front seven. So you take Stokes and Campbell and those guys that are gone, and Richard LeCount and all those guys are probably a little bit better than what Georgia's playing right now, especially experience-wise. But the front seven, man, you've got only a few seconds to turn that thing loose, or you're going to be, you saw a picture of a 6'5", 250-pound quarterback folded up. I don't even know how that dude was bending that way, in between a couple of Georgia players. So, they're going to face some guys that can move around. I don't think that's DJ's game as much to extend plays. That guy could throw it, knock a building down, but you give Georgia a set target, and that's how you end up with 7 sacks. They're coming, and we'll talk about that more. But I think the Georgia defense is what you're going to see all year. There's going to be a game where people are going to score points. That's going to happen. But you look at that front seven, man. I'm telling you, it gives you nightmares if you are an opposing team.
I'm going to go ahead and go here. Listen, Georgia's defense has been great in the past. Okay, 2017 defense was really good, and that 2019 defense was outrageous. I mean, statistically unreal. But Georgia hadn't had a defensive front like this, because when I went back and watched that, Jordan Davis popped off, Jalen Carter popped off, Devontae White may have had a better game than any of them because he was dominant. Zion Logue came in and played well. Nazir Stackhouse came in and played well. Warren Brinson comes in and gets a hurry on the quarterback. That's before we get to the outside linebackers and how Nolan Smith and Adam Anderson played. That's without even talking about how well the inside linebackers play. I mean, Nakobe Dean was probably your defensive MVP, and I think he may have had the only 2 mistakes, 1 missed tackle, 1 pass interference penalty in the front 7 all game long. Okay, Georgia hasn't had this type of dominance of potential in the front 7, and they just keep running guys in and out. It was crazy. I've never seen they would just like remove 3 or 4 players at one time, send 3 or 4 more in there, and there was no drop off. Rusty, you guys.
Just one thing I want you to watch, Jay, because I know you're going to do a film study and get into this. I want you to watch Jalen Carter on his sack and what he does to their tackle Parks. That is you talking about picking somebody up.
Yeah,
I mean,
his Parks' arms went into the air, and he was like acting like he tried not to fall off a building backwards. He was almost like Hans Gruber.
Yeah,
he was almost Hans Gruber from Die Hard. He was like, "Whoa!"
I mean, that right there. I mean, this is a P5 powerhouse. Clemson, they're down the O-line. We don't have to beat that down, but to see a guy that to do that to an offensive lineman, I mean, you watch that when you do your film study. Make note of that one because I watched that play a couple times.
Right. One thing I want to say before I throw it to Kit. Keep this on your mind, Georgia fans. At some point this year, you're going to be upset with how the defense played, and you're probably going to, kind of sound off and say we're too good to play like this. All right. And at some point this year, you're probably going to think the offense has turned the corner. All right. This is the nature of how the sport's played. It's the way how it goes, game by game. And listen, I know that's not fun. We want to project and listen, we're all going to be talking about something different, and maybe there's more hope after Georgia plays Alabama, UAB for the offense. Maybe there's a different discussion, but this is going to change game to game and what matters. And I know it's not sexy. I know it's not fun, but what matters is how much better this team gets. And for right now, I'm not really all that interested in trying to glean too much from one game. Because things are going to change. But the thing I think you can glean from this one game is that Georgia's going to be an absolute force up front for the rest of the football season, and I just don't think there's anything that's going to stop that from happening. Even an injury or two I don't think stops that from happening because Georgia's just got too many guys up there, and they've got a chance to be really good. Maybe a little thin at outside linebacker, but as far as defensive line, in a really, really good spot. Best spot Georgia's been in probably in maybe even 2 decades. Back to, I'm talking about Marcus Stroud, Richard Seymour, John Sullivan days. I think they're probably as good as they've been since then and probably deeper even than then. Kip, offense or defense, which is more indicative of the play on Saturday? Sorry it took so long for us to get to you.
It's all right, man. You guys kind of laid it out there pretty easy for me with this, but I mean, it's pretty clear. One side of the ball was healthier than the other one. And I think that's really where, we saw a lot of the same players that you're going to see out there throughout the season for Georgia's defense. And just to echo what you guys talked about, I mean, we talk about Dan Lanning and how he came out there and had an outstanding game plan, and it's all about timing. It wasn't like Georgia was sending the house. They were being aggressive, but they were getting these sacks at the 4-man front, and the first one was on a 3-man front, but then you had the next 5 on a 4-man front. It's not like they're sending the house against Clemson. So, it was just a really impressive job by that group, but really, also that secondary, Latavius Brini, that pass breakup in the end zone he had, and then on the next play, he boxed his guy out in the corner and made sure that the pass wasn't catchable for him. The one guy that I guess may have been a starter who was out this game, Tyke Smith. We had talked about the camp that Latavius Brini had. I think Brini was going to start in that game regardless, just based on the camp he had. And Tyke's he's going to have to come back and really pin his ears down and get after it in practice, because Latavius showed enough to earn some playing time moving forward. Then you combine that with Lewis Cine out there, really coming on strong late in the game, knocking a ball away. Obviously, the play by Chris Smith, the play of the game. And the fact that you didn't hear Darion Kendrick's name, him going up against his former team, that was one of the storylines. How is he going to do in the big game? In the big games last year for Clemson, it seemed like, maybe he gave up the big play or two. You didn't hear his name in this game. And that tells you all, if you're not hearing a cornerback's name, they're doing their job out there. So I think the secondary, obviously the pass rush, as Rusty said, it makes their job a lot easier, but they did their job on the back end, and it really, really limited Clemson's offense. And, it kind of makes it more difficult to really glean a lot from the game, because now we don't know what Clemson's offense is going to look like for the rest of the season, because it really seemed like they were not able to get anything going. Is it a product of Georgia's defense? Is it a product of just Clemson's offense not being where it needs to be? It's just not something you're used to seeing under Dabo Swinney. I mean, this was definitely the most dominating defense performance against the Clemson team under Dabo Swinney. So they got to go back to the drawing board and kind of figure some things out. But looking at the season, looking forward, I mean, I think that, Kirby Smart told you, even Jermaine Burton wasn't healthy out there. And when you know that he's not healthy, when you know Arian Smith's not 100%, when you know John Fitzpatrick's not 100%, you don't have Darnell Washington out there, you don't have Dominic Blaylock out there. I mean, that tells you that the offense shouldn't be where it needs to be. And that should be a positive. Like, Georgia fans should be kind of excited about that, is that against a top 5 team, they were able to do what needs to be done to win. And now they can focus on getting healthy. And I think that we haven't really seen what Georgia's offense will be able to look like moving forward down the year. I mean, are they going to face a better defense than what they faced in Clemson in this game? Maybe not. So I think as far as which unit could look very different toward the end of the year, I think there's a much greater chance that Georgia's defense faced one of the best offenses it's going to face this season than the other side. I mean, as far as is Georgia's offense going to face a better defense out there? I don't think so. Is their offense going to face inferior defenses toward the rest of the season? I think it's very possible that they're able to beat up on some teams and kind of do, impose their will on teams, both in the run game and the passing game. So it's brighter days ahead for the offense, and the defense is already showing you that it's a championship caliber unit that really, really give Georgia a chance to get to Atlanta and maybe have a chance to win a game there if they can take care of business week by week.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I mean, it's almost the same thing I would say if Georgia would have lost this game. And that's all that matters now is you got to get better. You got to get some kinks worked out. You got to get healthy. And Georgia took a step back in the health department in that game, losing Tate Ratledge for the season, foot injury, really nasty thing there for him, and a horrible break for a guy who worked his way into a starting role. Rusty, talk to me about that injury real quick, but also I want to hear from you on this. Is it plug and play, like basically throw Warren Erickson in there like it was Saturday, and that's how Georgia's going to handle it, or do you think they're going to shift some guys around?
Yeah, obviously the tough deal on Tate. So a young man I know his family. He's from my hometown. Tough deal. I think he was on play 3, and as Kirby says, Liz Frank, 5 or 6 months. If things go well, hopefully he can come back spring football. So maybe if he doesn't, you look for him to come back next year and hopefully be healthy and get to finish up, where he started, because he was having as good as camp as anybody. In fact, one person inside that building told me that nobody had a better fall camp than Tate Ratledge. So you hurt that for anybody, you hate that for anybody, but he's having surgery on Wednesday. So, hope the best for him and he can get back. But, I don't know, Jake. I don't know that it's plug and place. I think that you had to. Warren Erickson had some practice a ton. He had to step in there. And you talking about, hey, Warren, you haven't played a lot, but just come out here and just get about 3.5 quarters of Brian Breesy and just hope for the best. You know what I mean? And a Brian Breesy, but
hey, but credit to him. 3rd and 1 in the 4th quarter. Zamir White, Georgia's got to have a first down to kind of salt that game away. Yep. And listen, I know Brian Breesy is kind of worn down at that point. Warren Erickson takes him 5 yards down the line of scrimmage. Zeus breaks 2 tackles, runs over another one. First down, pretty much game over.
You talking about a running game to end it? I put out a tweet about Matt Luke and his group. 4 minutes and 48 seconds, I believe, to end that game, and Georgia was about to punch that in. I'll say it. Georgia was about to go up 17-3. They downed it, first down, the 11-yard line to finish the game, and nobody in the Georgia office cares about scoring another touchdown. They wanted to win that game and finish it out, and they did. But Georgia had taken control of that game and had that defense on the field a long time late. So that's something to kind of tuck away for later on. But I think, Jake, my opinion, this is where you're about to see some Broderick Jones. I think Broderick Jones, you're going to play a really good UAB team this weekend, and you're going to play South Carolina, and you're going to play Vandy. So, you got 3 games before you play Auburn. to plug in this young man and see what he can do at left tackle. And I'm not saying that's going to be the definitive answer, but I would be surprised if we don't see Schaefer and Jamari Salyer at guards and see some Broderick, at least that combination at some point Saturday. Warren Erickson certainly a guy that can play center. Can he get back to snapping? How did Van Pran play on tape? I don't know that. Calls, that type of thing is what you do by center. Just on the outside looking in, Van Pran had a pretty damn good game, but you guys know there comes a lot more playing center, identifying the mics, getting a protection set, and those types of things. How did he do there? We probably won't know until later on. But in my opinion, I think you're going to see Broderick Jones get inserted in this lineup. If he does not start, I think Broderick Jones is going to play a lot of reps, and I think that could be a combination potentially to answer this injury with Tate Ratliff. So we'll see moving forward, but I'm pretty confident you're going to see more Broderick Jones in some form or fashion, and I think he's going to be playing left tackle.
Kip, I got another question I'm going to get to you here real quick, but I want to chime in on what Rusty just said. I think you hit the nail on the head, Rusty, because and the reason I think that's because Kirby had a comment. We're going to get a little bit more into what Kirby said later on in the show, but Kirby had a comment about the center position, and he talked about the fear of playing Cedric Van Pran at center and then Warren Erickson at right guard is that you basically increase the likelihood that you're going to get one of those guys dinged up, and they're the two best centers on the football team. I think you're probably going to see Jamari Salyer, now that Warren Erickson is back and snapping with his left hand and working at the center position. I think you're going to see Jamari Salyer play no center or very little because he had to do that during preseason camp because of the injury to Erickson. I think you're going to see him start to get those reps at guard, likely left guard. Justin Schaefer starts to play some right guard. And then you work Broderick Jones. And now will he start, like you said, will he start against UAB? I don't know. But he's going to play some snaps. Heck, he played snaps against Clemson. Got an illegal man down film penalty. But he's going to get some snaps. And I think that might be the transition. This might be the transition period for that because – you look at kind of the athleticism and the power and the experience that you're able to put on the field whenever you're able to get, especially on the interior, whenever you're able to surround Cedric Van Pran with Justin Schaefer and Jamari Salyer, that's huge. And so I think that to me, if we're placing odds on that has the highest odds. I think Warren Erickson's always lurking there at right guard if you need him. Cedric Van Pran, there's still going to be a competition at that center spot. I expect both of them to continue to get first-team reps and for them to have them battle it out. It seems like JT Daniels is comfortable with both of them. But I do think it's Broderick Jones' time at left tackle, not necessarily to just go out there and take it over, but it's his time to kind of figure out if he wants it, how bad he wants it and whether Georgia has confidence in him doing it. Kip, when you look at Georgia's injury situation, right this second, without George Pickens, because we just have no idea when he's going to come back, who's the guy that Georgia needs to get back the most?
Well, I think it was just really interesting, Kirby's comments on Jermaine Burton, the fact that he'd only practiced in 10 to 15 of the 40 practices. That
blew me away because he's right. Like when you think about it, he's totally correct. But you don't draw that conclusion going into it, right?
Because I'm watching the game, and he's had some moments where just on the outside, it didn't seem like he was really getting it done, in blocking. I know that's been brought up a lot, but when you get more context, if he's not really up to par as far as that game shape and conditioning, then it starts to make more sense why he had some tough snaps on there. Because it looked like most of the outside runs that really had a lot of success, you either had Brock Bowers or Fitzpatrick kind of combo blocking with him out there on the edge as well. Both those guys putting, two hats on one defender on there. So, just the fact that we talked about him kind of being that, probably Georgia's most complete receiver heading into the season and then finding out he's not ready yet. Obviously Dominic Blaylock's a guy that they want to get out there whenever he's ready. Arian Smith brings a different dimension, but I think Jermaine Burton, you look at what they had to do, their game plan, how they adjusted to what they saw from Clemson's defense when they saw that they were playing that soft zone and they were basically, not going to give anything away deep. Then, they had to go to that quick passing game and kind of the outside runs and try to attack the perimeter a little bit. So it makes a little bit more sense when you start to find out that Georgia was even more banged up than what we thought. I mean, just 3 targets combined to, I think, Adonai Mitchell and Arian Smith. I mean, that tells you that it just wasn't there for this wide receiving core. And it's why the earlier question. I mean, obviously this offense is not a complete package right now. They don't have everybody out there. And I just think that if you're able to get a guy that can do a little bit of everything for you out there in Jermaine Burton, it'll really just help everything, give JT Daniels a little bit more confidence to push the ball downfield, open up the rest of the playbook. I mean, I just think that he's a key guy out there for them offensively right now and just has that skill set overall. I mean, just Kearis Jackson. Now, he obviously wasn't all the way back too, but the unit's banged up, you see who you can get back for UAB and maybe get some more looks out there and kind of get some more confidence, in JT and the overall group. I think Jermaine Burton would go a long way, towards doing that for Georgia right now.
One thing I want to point out, all right, AD Mitchell, is a guy that, we reported the buzz on him and everything. He actually did have 4 targets because 2 of them were negated for penalty. One of them, both of them PIs actually. So they went to him 4 times. Brock Bowers actually led the team in targets, which was pretty interesting. And Kirby said, you know what? Let's don't talk about what Kirby said. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Let's take one of those breaks real quick, and then we'll get into what Kirby said at today's in-person press conference on the other side. All right, guys, getting into what Kirby said. Let's start off with the thought I was basically going to end with the first before we went into a break. Kirby said that the game plan going in was to stay ahead of the chains, and you saw a lot of that with these play action dump offs and quick plays. They didn't run the ball as much on first down as teams have at Georgia in the past. They threw the ball quite a few times. You go before that final drive when Georgia had to keep the ball on the ground, there was a pretty healthy split between run and pass there, with pass having the advantage. But Georgia used the passing game to stay ahead of the chains. They kept themselves out of 3rd and long. They just didn't execute when they had to, and they weren't explosive. And to me, listen, I'm not super quick to be critical because it's really tough for me to do that knowing that they've just got so much more information than I've got, and I can't really – say what was supposed to happen or anything like that. There's just a lot of questions I can't answer for you. But I feel like Georgia, in a way, and maybe they knew this going in, I feel like they almost limited themselves with the game plan before the game ever started. And, if your game plan is to go in there and just stay ahead of the chains, I feel like Georgia, is where they, Rusty, do you think that's a byproduct of the injuries, or do you think maybe there was just – and I know this is going to be tough for you to say if you want to say it, but do you think there was maybe just a little bit too much respect and maybe a little bit of fear of Clemson's defensive line there? How do you look at that?
Let me tell you where I think, just from what I believe and kind of my feel of that staff, I think the game changed, Jake, after about 2 series, and I think Georgia knew Clemson couldn't score. I think they couldn't drive. They couldn't, dude. From the Jake, you've coached. You understand from the sideline and from once you see a couple of series and you see how they're going to line up. You see this, you see that. There comes a point. I don't care if you've coached or not. We've all watched a lot of football. I'm telling you, after those first 3 drives, I knew that Clemson was going to have a big play or a turnover to score. I felt pretty confident that Georgia had – they were just a mismatch up front. I mean, it was every single play that somebody either it was a split second that they were fixing to get him or he didn't make. There were some plays where he just looked completely confused, and he was getting rid of the ball. He threw the ball. How many times did you see him throw the ball and it just land? Like, you don't see that in a Clemson offense. Like, it didn't hit. He got rid of the ball to keep from getting hit. And I'm not, downgrading him or whatever, because I wouldn't stand in there and take that, no doubt. But there was a lot of miscommunication. There was a lot of times I felt like he just got rid of it. And Georgia fans probably want to hear this, but I think that Georgia realized that, hey, they're not scoring. Now, unless something crazy happens. That don't mean you can start from the third series and go just run the ball and check down all game. But I think kind of the game plan was a little bit different there. Is if they miss a field goal, okay, so that makes it a big difference when it's only 7-0 on a Chris Smith. It should have been 10-0 at that point. You miss a chip shot, and usually they make, Postlesny makes. But I really think, in my opinion, and I don't know this from any inside information, the game plan kind of changed when you realize, hey, we can hold these guys to 7 or 10 points probably. Okay, we don't have to win a shootout tonight. So, maybe Monken looked at it and said, don't turn the ball over. Let's try to get a couple of drives, because they had great field position. So credit Clemson's defense, but Georgia just couldn't get past the hump. But, their freaking punter he's lights out for Georgia. I mean, this guy, Jake Cromartie, to come from where he was as a freshman, this guy would shank one every four. And I'm thinking, because I've made the comment, it's the best leg I've ever seen in my life. This ball comes off of his leg. It sounds like a shotgun when he kicks it in person. I saw him kick one from Norcross against Colquitt County, a 50-something yarder to buzzer that was good in high school, in a Corky Kell game. This guy can boom it, and he pinned them back all night long. So I think Georgia knew it was going to be a struggle for Clemson to score. They had probably the advantage in special teams, and at that point, you're thinking, just don't turn the ball over, and let's see if we can drive down the field. If we have to dink and dunk and score. Now, they took a few shots, but I'm getting a little long-winded here. But Jake, the original questions, I think the game plan within the game changed when Georgia realized, hey, we got a big advantage here up front on those guys.
Interesting thought there. But at the end of the day, they would have loved to have scored more points. And we're getting to another thing that Kirby said in the press conference. Kippy talked about mistakes. He talked about a lot of mistakes. He even mentioned at one point where you watch the offensive line block and you're like, why in the world would you block that direction? Yeah. Things like that, like mistakes where he pointed out a play where Brock Bowers, AD Mitchell and Arian Smith were in the game. All three of them made a mistake on the same play. Play failed. Pointed out the fact that was Arian Smith's, third or fourth game as a player, and the other guy's first game. And that's kind of where they at. So as these guys get more experience, you expect Georgia to get better. But Kip, the mistakes. And Kirby said it almost excites you that you look at a game and you see mistakes like that because the ability's there, but you just have to kind of clean up some of those things. What did you make of that comment?
Well, other than the injury updates, that was the one that really caught my eye, and that's why I asked you about it, because it's one thing if you just don't have the guys out there. If you don't have the guys that can make plays, there's nothing you can't out coach the other team if your guys don't have the talent to step up when you need them to. And mental mistakes, that's something you can go back and fix. That's what the film room's for. And so it is a positive. There's a reason why you can look at the fact that Georgia did not score an offensive touchdown against, again, a top 5 opponent in Clemson, and take that as a positive because of how young these players are out there. I think Todd Monken probably had to take some of the playbook and toss it to the side when he realized, some of his young guys on the outside aren't going to be able to, to block long enough for some of these plays to develop. And, maybe when Tate Ratledge went out, when they're shuffling guys in, they're like, we're not going to be able to sustain our pass pro long enough for Arian Smith to get behind the secondary, or a guy to get more than 15 yards down the field. When Jalen Johnson has the longest reception at 16 yards, yeah. That tells you this is not the offense that they prepared to put on the field all offseason. That's no offense to Jalen Johnson. He went out there, made a play. You had walk-ons on both sides of the ball. Dan Jackson in there.
Jackson.
playing a lot against
Yeah.
the biggest game of the season, one of the biggest games in Kirby Smart's career. And he's got walk-ons on both sides of the ball making plays. I mean, that is still something you could take as a positive. It could also tell you that, they lack some depth. They were not healthy at some key positions out there, and it affected what they were able to do. So I agree with Rusty, though. That is the one thing that, that when they knew that, double-digit points is going to win this game, then, it might be still Kirby Smart's narrative as far as taking risks, but there's no reason to do that. There's no reason to go out there and take chances that you do not need to take in this game. And I think, again, other than a really, really bad look by JT Daniels, where you could see the linebackers right there, he made sure not to make those big mistakes. He threw the ball away and took a sack when he needed to give his team a chance to either put points on the board or, as Rusty said, Jake Camarda to put 4 or 5 punts inside the 20, put one inside the 10 in a field position game that we knew this was going to be a long battle. Those yards were really, really key for Georgia's defense to come out there and do their thing, which they did. I mean, if you have a known in this game, if you know your defense is going to be able to win their side of the ball, then there's no reason to ramp it up on the other side and potentially put your defense in bad situations, get them back on the field quicker than what they need to be, not allow them to get rested and put them in bad field position situations. So I think the offense did what it needed to do, but also there were execution issues that give Kirby Smart a chance to have coaching moments this week, with a UAB team coming to town and put some things in motion so that they can come out and maybe use more of the playbook this weekend. Not too much with the SEC schedule coming up, but enough to make sure they take care of business at home.
Good points. Good points. All right. One thing, don't want to get super deep into this because I don't know there's a whole lot of ways to analyze it, okay? But we're meeting with Kirby in person today. He gets asked about Ron Corson, says Ron Corson's doing well. Ron Corson's probably struggling more with not being able to work because there's hardly ever been 2 days in a row that he hadn't been in the building. But he also says Georgia's dealing with more COVID right now than they have since they kind of came back together as a team. I know they dealt with it some last year during bowl season, and that was an issue. Speaking of which, kind of even impacted Jermaine Burton because Jermaine Burton barely practiced for bowl practice because of that. Trayvon Walker missed the game, so there was some of that going on then. But guys, is it a big time concern, Rusty, that Georgia's all of a sudden dealing with COVID?
I don't know that they're all of a sudden dealing with COVID. I think maybe Kirby acknowledged it today to let you guys know that they are dealing with it and have been. My question here, Jake, if you are a vaccinated player, and I don't know the answer, and you may not, so I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm asking if you do know. If you're a vaccinated player and you test positive last night, what is the procedure after that?
I'm pretty sure. I think you have to go 10 days, and maybe it's 14, but I think it's 10, or until you get a certain number of negatives.
And you're not being tested unless you show symptoms.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So there's that, but this is something we're going to deal with the entire year. We don't have. This is not a political podcast. We're not getting into that, but vaccinated people are getting this as well, and whatever's going on in the world. So. This is something I don't care. You look at it's a prime example tonight. We're going to watch Ole Miss play Louisville. They're 100% vaccinated, and Lane Kiffin, was proud of his program for that. And look who's out tonight. It's Lane Kiffin. So this is something we're going to deal with week to week. But for Kirby to mention that on the first press conference back after a game, you kind of wonder who is this and who's out because I'm telling you now. This is not, people get on me a little bit because I got a little Vince Dooley or a little Larry Munson on that side. You want to talk up a team. UAB is not a bad team at all. They're not a bad team at all. Watched them play the other night. They got some freaking dudes. Now, I don't know this to be fact, but I heard today that if they played South Carolina or Vandy, they'd be favored in both of those games. So I don't know that's to be true. But I did pass that thought on Twitter today. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And I'll double check that. But they're a really, really good football team. And I guarantee you Kirby Smart has had his team understand those guys over there and the pro reports and all that type of thing. They're not walking into a game that this team's just going to lay down. This team's come over here to play football, and it sees this as opportunity to play, maybe one of the top 2 teams in the country on ESPN.
Kid, what were your thoughts when you heard that comment about the COVID and how Georgia's dealing with it right now?
It's just tough to really know. And I mean, it's not for us to know. Obviously, that info, whatever they tell us, is what we're supposed to have. But it could be staff, it could be support staff. It's tough to really know what members of the program are positive right now. But you got to go with what the protocol is. What the rules and guidelines that are given to them by the conference, and they're just going to continue to deal with that on a week-to-week basis. I mean, we're coming off. It impacted Georgia's season last season. They didn't get to play Vanderbilt because of this. And, we're kind of a year later, we're in a similar situation for now. And so that's not something that Georgia can really, as long as they're going by all the protocol that they have as a program and set by the SEC, that's all they can do and hope for the best. And Georgia was a program that did not get mentioned at all last year with any COVID issues. So when Kirby's mentioning it on his own, that, it's finally, it has affected him a little bit, but I think that if it's just a couple guys each week, maybe that's just the 2021 season that they're dealing with. And seeing the guys out there making plays and they're banged up, it reminds you this is why Kirby built the roster that he did, why he was brought there, to be able to handle if you have a guy or two who can't play. You have to use all 85 and above. Beyond the 85. Have a more talented walk-on program. Get as many guys in there as you can that can help you, if their name is called upon. So that's just going to be this where Georgia is. And there's really, really nothing that Kirby Smart can do about it other than have his guys make the best decisions possible and hope for the best. When Ron Corson's out there, and he's going through it, then that it could be any one of them at any week, including Kirby. So, he's going to do the best that he can. And every Saturday we're just going to be waiting to see who's out there and who's suited up on the field. That's the only thing we can do as far as how we cover it. Unless guys don't make the trip when they're on the road, then we'll be waiting on Saturday to see who's suited up. That's the 2021 season. That's where we are right now.
Good stuff, guys. And I'd like to point out that when Georgia suits up, tees it up against UAB on Saturday, it'll be Georgia's first game against a non-Power 5 or non-Top 10 team in the last 22 games. Georgia's played 22 straight games against either Power 5 teams or a Top 10 team. Cincinnati being the only non-Power 5 but a Top 10 team last year. Up until now, they've played 22 games in a row against teams of that stature. So that's you don't see that very often in today's college football, and Georgia's got a lot of them. They played 11 straight against teams to end the 2019 season, played 9 straight to start last season. Then they got their Top 10 team against Cincinnati, played Clemson to start this season. Now they get to play UAB, which is for now unranked and not a Power 5 team. We'll have that game covered for you. We'll be talking more about it later on this week. But for this episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast, I'm Jake Rowe with Dogs 24/7. They're Kip Adams and Rusty Mansell from the same place. You guys take it easy.